Okay. So the point of the session is just to go over the questions for the final exam and to go over the expectations for the final exam, and then see if you have any questions about either the questions for the final exam or for the just any general concepts from the class that you'd like to go over. So that's what we've got on the docket. Okay. So I'll just start with saying that the expectations for the final exam are very similar, if not identical, to the expectations for the midterm exam. Okay. And so, when I grade these exams, I look for people using resources, course resources. Okay. People should not be using resources outside of the course, except in sort of like really special sort of, like using it to sort of maybe support a point that you're making, but it generally should just, you can, use the course resources. And then also, as you know, that you should rely on a variety of course resources. So for this exam, the textbook, the book locked in, if it's appropriate, any of the articles we've done for discussion, and quite frankly, you can use anything throughout the whole semester at this point, right? If it helps you answer the questions. And then of course the lectures. Okay. So when I look at your exams, look, are you pulling on all the course material, not for every single question, but just in general. So keep that in mind as you are working on the exam. Other things to keep in mind, you guys know this, but the page number is about the same. And so, you look at the essay questions and, there's 6 to choose from, you choose 4. I want you to make sure to leave the question, in the body of your exam. It helps you answer the question. It also helps me grade it. And then just skip the ones that you're not answering. And then also ballpark is your answer should be about 2 pages long. Okay. A little less than that is okay. A little more is okay. But I mean, if your answers are less than 1 page, go back and, make sure that you're really answering the questions in a fully supported way with detail. And, on the flip side of that, you don't need to tell me everything you know about the subject matter, right? So really like answer the question that is in the essay question. Don't give me information that is beyond the scope of the question. Okay. That allows you to have a more focused answer. Okay. So I'm not gonna go and look at the, the Canvas page that has all of the, detailed instructions, because we did that for midterms. You guys should be pretty familiar with those for the final, since they're really similar. That, information about how to cite your resources is there. And while I don't really want you to use outside resources, if you do, make sure that you include that at the end with your cited sources. You really don't need to do that for the textbook and the lectures. I mean, do that as an in-text citation, but you don't have to like add like a page at the end that sort of says these are the sources that I've used, because I'm very familiar with them since they are course sources. Okay, so that's just sort of an overview of the expectations. Does anybody have any questions about those expectations? All right, hearing none, I'm going to go ahead and share the screen and we'll take a look at the questions. Okay. All right, so share. Let me get this out of here, and I just have them on my desktop, so I will bring them up. Where is it? All right. There was a little bit of problem with dates here at the end of the semester, as you noticed. Maybe I didn't change the dates. We had a meeting at noon, and that's why I had to change the time for this final exam session. There was an all-campus meeting, but then I forgot to change it in Canvas. So, but then I finally did. There was also a little bit of a problem with the notation of when this exam is due. It's all corrected now, though. The exam is due on Monday. In some places it said Monday, May 16th. That it was incorrect. So it's Monday at May 15th at 11:59 p.m. Okay. And so just keep that in mind. As is always the case, I am not a pretty understanding professor. And so if as you're working on the exam, you come into some, sort of problems and you need a little bit of extra time, that's okay. just contact me and let me make the decision about whether I'm going to grant you like an extension. Okay. So ideally it's getting in at that time. But again, if you run into some trouble, just let me know. Okay. And we'll try to work around that. And as was the case for the midterm exam, make sure you, when you download the exam, make sure that you save it to your desktop. Okay. And so keep that in mind so that there are not any, so you don't lose your work. Okay. Now for the final, I have a lot of grading to do. And so I don't leave comments unless you tell me that you want comments. Okay. So as it says there, if you want comments on the exam, I'm happy to make them. It's not my first trip to the rodeo. So a lot of times students don't read comments on their final exam. They're just happy to get the grade or unhappy, and then they just go away. But if you actually want some feedback, let me know and just leave it in the comment box on Canvas. Okay. All right. So you've got some questions here. So let's go through the questions and then we'll go question by question to see if you have any questions about the questions. So the first question is about the Fourth Amendment and, the search and seizure. And so we did a whole section on the police and the rule of law. And so this is basically, that it says that the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable search and seizure shall not be violated. In this question, I want you to tell me, what does that mean? Like, what does the Fourth Amendment tell us about searches? What constitutes a search? Okay, we covered that in lecture and the textbook as well. That keep in mind that the Fourth Amendment says here that you're free from unreasonable search. Unreasonable is a really important word. So what makes a search unreasonable? And then, do police need a warrant for a search to be considered reasonable? Okay, so those are all questions I want you to answer. Okay. Hint, we talked about the warrantless search, right? You don't need to have a warrant for a search to be reasonable. Okay. And so keep that in mind. That's just a little hint. And then I want you to select 2 Fourth Amendment cases that are discussed in chapter 8. And then I want you to describe each case briefly, including the decision of the court. And then I want you to tell me why you think what does this case tell you about the Fourth Amendment search and, the search clause? And do you agree with the way that the court decided this case? Okay. My husband just got home, so just a little noise in the background, letting the dogs out. And so, when I'm grading this question, I'm really looking at how much detail you know about the case, and really like what this case tells us about police and their ability to or to not search. Okay. So that is what I'm sort of looking at. If you like the Fourth Amendment, you should enjoy answering this question. All right. So you guys have any questions about the question?
I do.
Okay.
Where were the cases from chapter 8? I don't remember seeing that.
Well, just throughout chapter 8, they talk about specific cases that are referenced, okay, that give us insight to whether or not a search is legal, okay? And so
oh, sorry.
there you go.
Was it in the book?
Yes, it's in the book.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, it's in chapter 8.
Thank
so
you.
as in chapter 8 is they're talking about like how we know whether or not a search for is legal. We know that because the Supreme Court tells us that, right? And so there are, cases that they reference in the textbook. Okay. So find those cases, and those are the ones that you that you should be using. Okay. And then I don't have my textbook in front of me, but I mean, after I can also, who is this? Is this Ariel? Who asked that question?
It was Ariel.
Yeah. I can also just, if you email me after this and you're like, dude, professor, I still can't find these cases, just let me know and I'll lead you in the right direction. Okay. And
Thank you.
that goes for anybody listening to this tape. Any other questions about it? All right, let's move on to the next one. So the next one is we learned about how the court system in the United States is structured. Okay. And so this is an opportunity for you to describe the structure and the purpose of the court system. Okay. So that was in the textbook. We also did lectures on that. If you want, feel free to draw a diagram of the court system and insert it into your answer, hand created only. Okay. What I mean is don't cut and paste a diagram that you found on the internet and take a screenshot and put it in your exam. That's not what I'm looking for. If you have the capacity to draw it, take a picture of it, and then insert that into your exam, absolutely fine. If you want to construct it in a computer, form using like a PDF and drawing on it or whatever, that's fine. You don't have to do that. Some students just really like to do that. Okay. So as it says there, don't cut and paste from another source, but just, make your own. And, but again, that's just, you don't have to do that, but some people like to visually draw it out. So points to consider as you're describing the structure and purpose of the court system. And that's really what you're going to be graded on. Can you demonstrate to me, how our court system is structured and what the purpose of the court system is? But some things to consider. We talked a lot about that our court system is structured by federalism and federal supremacy. So you might want to talk about how that helps organize our courts. That there are different types of courts, both federal courts and state courts. How are those different? We've talked about the trial, the appellate, and Supreme Courts. And so you're going to want to describe all of that. Okay. And then, so that's the descriptive part. Okay. And here comes the critical thinking part. Okay. So of these three courts, trial, appellate, and Supreme, okay, of those three, which one of those, trial courts or appellate court, okay, the intermediate appellate court, or the top court of the land, either the state Supreme Court or the Supreme Court of the United States, of these three courts, which do you think is most essential to realizing criminal justice? Okay. Why? Explain your answer. Okay. And so you can make a case that like trial courts are incredibly important for criminal justice, right? It's where the trial takes place. It's where guilt or not guilt is determined, right? And so you can make a case that that's the most important court. But there's a good case to be made that the appellate court is the most important for criminal justice, for criminal cases, because we want to make sure that justice is achieved, right? Due process, fair treatment, checks on power, etc. And so, choose one of the courts. And even though the Supreme Court is both at the state level and the federal level, the federal Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court, even though those are appellate courts, that's the Supreme Court is a different category of court. It's the court of so-called last resort. Okay. And so that's that question. Any questions about question 2? All right. Hearing none. And so this is about the prosecutor. And so the big question is, I want you to describe the duties and responsibilities of the prosecutor. Summarize. Okay, you don't have to tell me every duty. You don't have to tell me every responsibility. But if you met somebody who didn't know anything about a prosecutor in the United States, what would you tell them, right? What are the key information that they need to know what role they play in our criminal justice system? And then how's the prosecutor different or similar to the defense attorney? Okay. That their duties are different. How are those duties different? You can also do a compare and contrast, but you could say they're different in this way, but they're similar in this way. Okay. And then the next part is about charging. We know that prosecutors have prosecutorial discretion. I want you to tell me what it is and why the prosecutor has that discretion. And then what are some of the reasons for why we give the prosecutor discretion and what are some of the consequences? And then in lecture and also the textbook that there's 4 factors that prosecutors take into consideration when deciding whether or not to proceed with the case, right? Prosecutors decide, am I going to charge somebody with a crime? And so you need to identify those 4 and then pick just 2, okay, that you think are most likely to impact the prosecutor's charging decision, okay? So I'm not going to say what the 4 are, but tell me the 2 that you think are more the most important in terms of driving decision making. Explain. And then finally, the critical thinking question is prosecutorial discretion, is it beneficial or detrimental to criminal justice in the United States? Okay. There's no right answer to that, right? I mean, as we know, there's reasons why we want to give cops and prosecutors discretion to do their job. If they didn't have any discretion, everybody would be charged with a crime, right? But there's consequences to that as well. Now, and so the best answers will reference Locked In, okay? Because so much of Locked In talks about the problems associated with prosecutorial discretion, okay? So that's that question. Any questions with that question? All right. The next question is pretty straightforward, and I'll tell you, this is probably the last semester I'm going to be doing identify and describe questions now that we're in the realm of AI. So a lot of, I'm doing more application stuff like number 5, but you guys are, hopefully nobody's cheating, but I'm, now all professors are paranoid about, people using the chatbots. But anyways, don't do it. And this is about the trial process, okay? So identify and describe the steps in the trial process, okay? You don't have to tell me everything about, you need to get the steps right, but you just need to summarize what the steps are, okay? What happens in those steps. And I give you a hint that the trial process starts with jury selection, okay? But the more important aspect of this is, of the steps in the process, which two do you think is most crucial for ensuring a just and fair criminal trial? And you really, why do you think that is? Why those two and not other ones, right? And explain your answer, okay? So the vast majority of this question is going to be graded by your capacity, not just to describe which of the steps, but for you to tell me which are the most important. I think a case can be made for a lot of the steps in the jury process as being important. So there's no right or wrong answer, but you got to make a strong case for it, what you choose. Okay, that's how I'll be judging and evaluating your answer. Pretty straightforward. Any questions about that? And feel free to use anything we've watched this semester, right? We watched so that we have the extra credit assignment, the Gideon's army, and so if you watch that, you see the trial process in action. We watched Dead Man Walking. You sort of saw the post-trial in action, right? And so anything that we sort of looked at during the course of the semester, you can sort of use. Hey, you went to sat in on court reports, right? I mean, so you might anything is fair game. Just kind of be creative. All righty. So the next question is the sentencing. This is a hypothetical. And so here's the case. We're not going to go through the case, but if you have questions about it, I'll answer them. But here's this case. It's a woman, she's driving while she's drunk. She doesn't have any criminal records, right? And she basically passes out on the side of the road. Cops, find her. They take her into custody, and there's a child and then the car is impounded, and then a child is found in the back. Okay. And so that we know what she is being charged with. Okay. She's pled guilty to 1 count of operating vehicle while intoxicated and 2 counts of child endangerment. Okay. And then the defense attorney and the prosecutors are making recommendations of how they think this person should be sentenced. But you're the sentencing judge. So based on what you've learned about the purposes of the sentence, and the goals of the sentence and types of sentences you can give, tell me what sentence you're going to give this person, and then tell me why. Okay. So you're the sentencing job. Describe the sentence you would give this person. You have complete discretion. I mean, we don't use indeterminate sentencing in Wisconsin, but you can use it. Okay. You have complete discretion. And then, I explain 2 of the goals that you hope to your sentence is designed to achieve. And then make sure that you tell me the type of sentence, indeterminate, and explain why you selected this type. And then finally, explain 3 factors that you considered in imposing the sentence. So that's like a lot of what we covered in this, in the sentencing lectures and also in the textbook. And so this gives you an opportunity to apply what you've learned to this hypothetical. Okay, I think that's a fun question. I hope people do it. So we'll see. So what do you think? Any questions about the question or any questions about the hypothetical case? If you had a chance to take a look at it. All right, hearing none. The last one, pretty straightforward. That I want you to describe the Pennsylvania and the Auburn prison system. Compare and contrast these two systems. What are the goals of these different prison types? And what are the values that these types of prisons, when we create these kinds of prisons, what are those prisons telling us about our values? And also when we create these two different types of prisons, what are these prisons, what are the assumptions that these types of prisons make about human nature? And then say, how are those values and those assumptions about human nature reflected in these systems? So you have to tell me which is between Auburn and Pennsylvania, which is the type of system that is used in corrections today. And then, sort of the critical thinking piece here is that of these two, which do you think should be used in the United States? So there's a right answer to which one is used in the United States. But then I want you to tell me which one do you think should be used, Pennsylvania or Auburn, okay? And then finally, if heaven forbid you were ever incarcerated, would you prefer to be in the Pennsylvania or Auburn system? And then explain why, okay? So any questions about that last question? All right, hearing none, I'm going to stop the share there. So again, just keep in mind, I'm really like, I assume students don't know what they're talking about, right? Sometimes when I'm reading exams, I kind of go from the demonstrate that to me that you know this material, right? And so as you're working on your exam, you don't have to go overboard, but just like, there should be beyond a reasonable doubt, right? Like that you don't leave any reasonable doubt in my mind. Like, do they really understand that? So really like try to make your case in terms of demonstrating to me that you understand this material and that you're using course materials to support the points that you're making. Okay. All right. Well, so let's see. I'll just go person by person. Ariel, do you have any questions?
I'm good, thank you.
Autumn, do you have any questions? Hearing none. Trisha, do you have any questions?
No, I'm good, thank you.
All right. And then do you guys have any questions about any of the material or anything, like any concept you want to go over or anything? All right. Well, as you're working on your questions in your exam, I'm around, hooked in all the time to my computer, at least from 8 to 5 most days, not as much on the weekend, but this weekend I'll be more hooked in because it's, the final exam times. So I'll be checking my email. Texting is a good way of getting in touch with me as well. So if you come across any questions, need clarification, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm working on getting all the court report papers graded as soon as possible so that you have a good sense of your grade moving into the final exam. So I'll be working on those today and also through the weekend. Okay. So thanks for all your hard work this semester. I really appreciate it. And good luck with the rest of your finals. And I look forward to reading your final exam. Okay. All right. Thanks for attending.